Chapter 14. 4 inert bodies sank through spinning blackness. Consciousness had died. Cold oblivion pulled the bodies down and down into the pit of unbeing. The roar of silence echoed dismally around them, and they sank at last into a dark and bitter sea of heaving red that slowly engulfed them, seemingly forever. After what seemed an eternity, the sea receded and left them lying on a cold, hard shore, the flotsam and jetsam of the stream of life, the universe, and everything. Cold spasms shook them. Lights danced sickeningly around them. The cold, hard shore tripped and spun and then stood still. It shone darkly. It was a very highly polished, cold, hard shore. A green blur watched them disapprovingly. It coughed. "Good evening, madam, gentlemen," it said. "Do you have a reservation?" Ford Prefect's consciousness snapped back like elastic, making his brain smart. He looked up woozily at the green blur. "Reservation?" he said weakly. "Yes, sir," said the green blur. "Do you need a reservation for the afterlife?" Insofar as it is possible for a green blur to arch its eyebrows disdainfully, this is what the green blur now did. "Afterlife, sir?" it said. Arthur Dent was grappling with his consciousness the way one grapples with the lost bar of soap in the bath. "Is this the afterlife?" he stammered. "Well, I assume so," said Ford Prefect, trying to work out which way was up. He tested the theory that it must lie in the opposite direction from the cold, hard shore on which he was lying, and staggered to what he hoped were his feet. "I mean," he said, swaying gently, "there's no way we could have survived that blast, is there?" "No," muttered Arthur. He raised himself onto his elbows, but it didn't seem to improve things. He slumped down again. "No," said Trillian, standing up. "No way at all." A dull, hoarse, gurgling sound came from the floor. It was Zaphod Beeblebrox attempting to speak. "I certainly didn't survive," he gurgled. "I was a total goner. Wham, bang, and that was it." "Yeah, thanks to you," said Ford. "We didn't stand a chance. We must have been blown to bits, arms, legs, everywhere." "Yeah," said Zaphod, struggling noisily to his feet. "If the lady and gentleman would care to order drinks," said the green blur, hovering impatiently beside them. "Kerplow, splat," continued Zaphod, "instantaneously zonked into our component molecules." "Hey, Ford," he said, identifying one of the slowly solidifying blurs around him. "Did you get that thing of your whole life flashing before you?" "You got that too?" said Ford. "Your whole life?" "Yeah," said Zaphod. "At least I assume it was mine. I spend a lot of time out of my skulls, you know." He looked around him at the various shapes that were at last becoming proper shapes, instead of vague and wobbling, shapeless shapes. "So," he said. "So what?" said Ford. "So here we are," said Zaphod hesitantly. "Lying dead, standing," Trillian corrected him. Standing dead," considered Zaphod. "In this desolate restaurant," said Arthur Dent, who had got to his feet and could now, much to his surprise, see clearly. That is to say, the thing that surprised him was not that he could see, but what he could see. "Here we are," continued Zaphod doggedly, "standing dead in this desolate 5-star, said Trillian. "Restaurant," concluded Zaphod. "Odd, isn't it?" said Ford. Yeah. "Nice chandeliers, though," said Trillian. They looked about themselves in bemusement. "It's not so much an afterlife," said Arthur, "more of a sort of après-vie." The chandeliers were, in fact, a little on the flashy side, and the low, vaulted ceiling from which they hung would not, in an ideal universe, have been painted in that particular shade of deep turquoise. And even if it had been, it wouldn't have been highlighted by concealed mood lighting. This is not, however, an ideal universe, as was further evidenced by the eye-crossing patterns of the inlaid marble floor and the way in which the frosting for the 80-yard-long marble-topped bar had been made. The fronting for the 80-yard-long marble-topped bar had been made by stitching together nearly 20,000 Antarian mosaic lizard skins, despite the fact that the 20,000 lizards concerned had needed them to keep their insides in. A few smartly dressed creatures were lounging casually at the bar, or relaxing in the richly colored, body-hugging seats that were deployed here and there about the bar area. A young Vlahurg officer and his green, steaming young lady passed through the large, smoked glass doors at the far end of the bar into the dazzling light of the main body of the restaurant beyond. Behind Arthur was a large, curtained bay window. He pulled aside the corner of the curtain and looked out to a bleak and dreary landscape, gray, pockmarked, and dismal. A landscape which, under normal circumstances, would have given Arthur the creeping horrors. These were not, however, normal circumstances, for the thing that froze his blood and made his skin try to crawl up his back and off the top of his head was the sky. The sky was... An attendant flunky politely drew the curtain back into place. "All in good time, sir," he said. Zaphod's eyes flashed. "Hey, wait a minute, you guys. I think we're missing something ultra important here. You know, something somebody said, and we missed it." Arthur was profoundly relieved to turn his attention from what he had just seen. He said, "I said it was sort of an après, yeah. And don't you wish you hadn't, Ford?" "I said it was odd." "Yeah, shrewd but dull. Perhaps it was..." "Perhaps," interrupted the green blur, who had by this time resolved into the shape of a small, wizened, dark-suited green waiter, "perhaps you would care to discuss the matter over drinks." "Drinks!" cried Zaphod. "That was it! See what you miss if you don't stay alert." "Indeed, sir," said the waiter patiently. "If the lady and gentleman would care to take drinks before dinner..." "Dinner!" Zaphod exclaimed with passion. "Listen, little green person, my stomach could take you home and cuddle you all night for the mere idea." "And the universe," continued the waiter, determined not to be deflected on his homestretch, "will explode later for your pleasure." Ford's head swiveled slowly toward him. He spoke with feeling. "Wow," he said. "What sort of drinks do you serve in this place?" The waiter laughed a polite little waiter's laugh. "Ah," he said, "I think sir has perhaps misunderstood me." "Oh, I hope not," breathed Ford. The waiter coughed another polite little waiter's cough. "It's not unusual for our customers to be a little disorientated by the time journey. So if I might suggest..." "Time journey," said Zaphod. "Time journey," said Ford. "Time journey," said Trillian. "You mean this isn't the afterlife?" said Arthur. The waiter smiled a polite little waiter's smile. He had almost exhausted his polite little waiter repertoire and would soon be slipping into the role of a rather tight-lipped and sarcastic little waiter. "Afterlife, sir? No, sir." "And we're not dead," said Arthur. The waiter tightened his lips. "Aha, ha. Sir is most evidently alive, otherwise I would not attempt to serve, sir." In an extraordinary gesture which it is pointless attempting to describe, Zaphod Beeblebrock slapped both his foreheads with two of his arms and one of his thighs with the other. "Hey, guys," he said, "this is crazy. We did it. We finally got to where we were going. This is Milliways." "Milliways," said Ford. "Yes, sir," said the waiter, laying on the patience with a trowel. "This is Milliways, the restaurant at the end of the universe." "End of what?" said Arthur. "The universe," repeated the waiter very clearly and unnecessarily distinctly. "When did that end?" said Arthur. "In just a few minutes, sir," said the waiter. He took a deep breath. He didn't need to do this since his body was supplied with the peculiar assortment of gases it required for survival from a small intravenous device strapped to his leg. There are times, however, when, whatever your metabolism, you have to take a deep breath. "Now, if you would care to order your drinks at last, I will then show you to your table." Zaphod grinned two manic grins, sauntered over to the bar, and bought most of it. Chapter 15. The restaurant at the end of the universe is one of the most extraordinary ventures in the entire history of catering. It has been built on the fragmented remains of, it will be built on the fragmented, that is to say, it will have been built by this time, and indeed has been. One of the major problems encountered in time travel is not that of accidentally becoming your own father or mother. There is no problem involved in becoming your own father or mother that a broad-minded and well-adjusted family can't cope with. There is no problem about changing the course of history. The course of history does not change because it all fits together like a jigsaw. All of the important changes have happened before the things they were supposed to change, and it all sorts itself out in the end. The major problem is quite simply one of grammar, and the main work to consult in this matter is Dr. Dan Streetmentioner's Time Traveler's Handbook of 1001 Tense Formations. It will tell you, for instance, how to describe something that was about to happen to you in the past before you avoided it by time jumping forward 2 days in order to avoid it. The event will be described differently according to whether you are talking about it from the standpoint of your own natural time, from a time in the further future, or a time in the further past, and is further complicated by the possibility of conducting conversations while you're actually traveling from one time to another with the intention of becoming your own mother or father. Most readers get as far as the future semi-conditionally modified subinverted plagial past subjunctive intentional before giving up. And in fact, in later editions of the book, all the pages beyond this point have been left blank to save printing costs. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy skips lightly over this tangle of academic abstraction, pausing only to note that the term future perfect has been abandoned since it was discovered not to be. To resume, the restaurant at the end of the universe is one of the most extraordinary ventures in the entire history of catering. It is built on the fragmented remains of an eventually ruined planet, which is Wheelhavenby, enclosed in a vast time bubble and projected forward in time to the precise moment of the end of the universe. That is, many would say, impossible. In it, guests take their places at table and eat sumptuous meals while watching the whole of creation explode around them. This, many would say, is equally impossible. At the restaurant, you can meet and dine with a fascinating cross-section of the entire population of space and time. This, it can be explained patiently, is also impossible. You can visit it as many times as you like, and be sure of never meeting yourself because of the embarrassment this usually causes. This, even if the rest were true, which it isn't, is patently impossible, say the doubters. All you have to do is deposit 1 penny in a savings account in your own era, and when you arrive at the end of time, the operation of compound interest means the fabulous cost of your meal has been paid for. This, many claim, is not merely impossible, but clearly insane, which is why the advertising executives of the star system of Bastablon came up with this slogan. If you've done 6 impossible things this morning, why not round it off with breakfast at Milliway's, the restaurant at the end of the universe? Just for your sake, I'll let you know I skipped some of the Dr. Streetmentioner's future perfect grammar. All right, chapter 16. At the bar, Zaphod was rapidly becoming as tired as a newt. His heads knocked together and his smiles were coming out of sync. He was miserably happy. Zaphod, said Ford, while you're still capable of speech, would you care to tell me what the photon happened? Where have you been? Where have we been? Small matter, but I'd like it cleared up. Zaphod's left head sobered up, leaving his right to sink further into the obscurity of drink. Yeah, he said, I've been around. They want me to find a man who rules the universe, but I don't care to meet him. I believe the man can't cook. His left head watched his right head saying this and then nodded. True, it said. Have another drink. Ford had another pan-galactic gargle blaster, the drink which has been described as the alcoholic equivalent of a mugging, expensive and bad for the head. Whatever had happened, Ford decided, he didn't really care too much. Listen, Ford, said Zaphod, everything's cool and fruity. You mean everything's under control? No, said Zaphod. I do not mean everything's under control. That would not be cool and fruity. If you want to know what happened, let's just say I had the whole situation in my pocket, okay? Ford shrugged. Zaphod giggled into his drink. It frothed up over the side of the glass and started to eat its way into the marble bar top. A wild-skinned sky gypsy approached them and played electric violin at them until Zaphod gave him a lot of money, and he agreed to go away. The gypsy approached Arthur and Trillian, sitting in another part of the bar. I don't know what this place is, said Arthur, but I think it gives me the creeps. Have another drink, said Trillian. Enjoy yourself. Which, said Arthur, the two are mutually exclusive. Poor Arthur, you're not really cut out for this life, are you? You call this life? You're beginning to sound like Marvin. Marvin's the clearest thinker I know. How do you think we make this violinist go away? The waiter approached. Your table is ready, he said. Seen from the outside, which it never is, the restaurant resembles a giant glittering starfish beached on a forgotten rock. Each of its arms houses the bars, the kitchens, the force field generators, which protect the entire structure, and the decayed hunk of planet on which it sits, and the time turbines which slowly rock the whole affair backward and forward across the crucial moment. In the center sits a gigantic golden dome, almost a complete globe, and it was into this area that Zaphod, Ford, Arthur, and Trillian now passed. At least 5 tons of glitter alone had gone into it before them and covered every available surface. The other surfaces were not available because they are already encrusted with jewels, precious seashells from Centranginus, gold leaf, mosaic tiles, lizard skins, and millions of unidentifiable embellishments and decorations. Glass glittered, silver shone, gold gleam. Arthur Dent goggled. Wow-wee, said Zaphod. Zappo! Incredible, breathed Arthur. The people, the things. The things, said Ford Prefect quietly, are also people. The people, resumed Arthur. The other people. The lights, said Trillian. The tables, said Arthur. The cloths, said Trillian. The waiter thought they sounded like a couple of bailiffs. The end of the universe is very popular, said Zaphod, threading his way unsteadily through the throng of tables, some made of marble, some of rich ultra-mahogany, some even of platinum, and at each a party of exotic creatures chatting amongst themselves and studying menus. People like to dress up for it, continued Zaphod. Gives it a sense of occasion. The tables were fanned out in a large circle around a central stage area where a small band was playing light music. At least 1,000 tables was Arthur's guess, and interspersed among them were swaying palms, hissing fountains, grotesque statuary. In short, all of the paraphernalia common to all restaurants where little expense has been spared to give the impression that no expense has been spared. Arthur glanced round, half expecting to see someone making an American Express commercial. Zaphod lurched into Ford, who lurched back into Zaphod. Wow-wee, said Zaphod. Sappo, said Ford. My great-granddaddy must have really screwed up the computer's works, you know. I told it to take us to the nearest place to eat, and it sent us to the end of the universe. Remind me to be nice to it one day. He paused. Hey, everybody here, you know? Everybody here who was anybody? Was, said Arthur. At the end of the universe, you have to use the past tense a lot, said Zaphod, because everything's been done, you know. Hi, guys, he called out to a nearby party of giant iguana life forms. How do you do? Is that Zaphod Beeblebrox? Said one iguana to another iguana. I think so, replied the second iguana. Well, doesn't that just take the biscuit? Said the first iguana. Funny old thing, life, said the second iguana. It's what you make it, said the first, and they lapsed back into silence. They were waiting for the greatest show in the universe. Hey, Zaphod, said Ford, grabbing for his arm, and, on account of the third pan-galactic gargle blaster missing, he pointed a swaying finger. There's an old mate of mine, he said. Hot Black DeSadio. See the man at the platinum table with the platinum suit on? Zaphod tried to follow Ford's finger with his eyes, but it made him feel dizzy. Finally, he saw. Oh, yeah, he said. And recognition came a moment later. Hey, did that guy ever make it mega big? Wow, bigger than the biggest thing bigger than the biggest thing ever, other than me? Who's he supposed to be? Asked Trillian. Hot Black DeSadio? Said Zaphod in astonishment. You don't know? You've never heard of Disaster Area? No, said Trillian, who hadn't. The biggest, said Ford, loudest rock band in the history of, he searched for the word, history itself, said Zaphod. No, said Trillian. So said Zaphod. Here we are at the end of the universe and you haven't even lived yet. Did you miss out? He led her off to where the waiter had been waiting all the time at the table. Arthur followed them, feeling very lost and alone. Ford waded off through the throng to renew an old acquaintance. Hey there, Hot Black, he called out. How you doing? Great to see you, big boy. How's the noise? You're looking great. Really very, very fat and unwell. Amazing. He slapped the man on the back and was mildly surprised that it seemed to elicit no response. The pan-galactic gargle blasters swirling around inside him told him to plunge on regardless. Remember the old days, he said. We used to hang out, right? The Bistro Illegal, remember? Slim's Throat Emporium, the Evil Drome Boozerama. Great days, huh? Hot Black DeSadio offered no opinion as to whether they were great days or not. Ford was not perturbed. And when we were hungry, we'd pose as public health inspectors. You remember that. And go around confiscating meals and drinks, right? Till we got food poisoning. Oh, and then there was the long nights of talking and drinking in the smelly rooms above Cafe Lou and Gretchentown, New Beetle. And you were always in the next room trying to write songs on your agitar, and we all hated them. And you said you didn't care, and we said we did because we hated them so much. Ford's eyes were beginning to mist over. And you said you didn't want to be a star, he continued, wallowing in nostalgia, because you despised the star system. And we said, Hadra and Suijo and me, that we didn't think you had the option. And what do you do now? You buy star systems. He turned and solicited the attention of those at nearby tables. Here, he said, is a man who buys star systems. Hot Black DeSadio made no attempt either to confirm or deny this fact, and the attention of the temporary audience waned rapidly. I think someone's drunk, murmured a purple bush-like being into his wine glass. Ford staggered slightly and sat down heavily on a chair facing Hot Black. What's that number you do? He said, unwisely grabbing at a bottle for support and tipping it over into a nearby glass. As it happened, not to waste a happy accident, he drained the glass. That really huge number, he continued. How does it go? Something. And in the stage act, you do it. It ends up with the ship crashing right into the sun, and you actually do it. Ford crashed his fist into his other hand to illustrate this feat graphically. He knocked the bottle over again. Ship, sun, wham, bang! I mean, forget lasers and stuff. You guys are into solar flares and real sunburn. Oh, and terrible songs. His eyes followed the stream of liquid gurgling out of the bottle onto the table. Something ought to be done about it, he thought. Hey, you want a drink? He said. It began to sink into his squelching mind that something was missing from this reunion, and that the missing something was in some way connected to the fact that the fat man sitting opposite him in the platinum suit and the silvery hat had not yet said, "Hey, Ford," or "Great to see you after all this time," or in fact anything at all. And more to the point, he had not yet even moved. "Hoplack?" said Ford. A large, meaty hand landed on his shoulder from behind and pushed him aside. He slid gracelessly off the seat and peered upward to see if he could spot the owner of this discourteous hand. The owner was not hard to spot, on account of his being something on the order of 7 feet tall and not slightly built with it. In fact, he was built the way one builds leather sofas, shiny, lumpy, and with lots of solid stuffing. The suit into which the man's body had been stuffed looked as if its only purpose in life was to demonstrate how difficult it was to get this sort of body into a suit. The face had the texture of an orange and the color of an apple, but there the resemblance to anything sweet ended. "Kid," said a voice which emerged from the man's mouth, as if it had been having a really rough time down in his chest. Yeah?" said Ford conversationally. He staggered back to his feet again and was disappointed that the top of his head didn't come further up the man's body. "Beat it," said the man. "Oh, yeah?" said Ford, wondering how wise he was being. "And who are you?" The man considered this for a moment. He wasn't used to being asked this sort of question. Nevertheless, after a while, he came up with a solution. "I'm the guy who's telling you to beat it before you get it beaten for you." "Now listen," said Ford nervously. He wished his head would stop spinning, settle down, and get to grips with the situation. "Now listen," he continued. "I am one of Hotblack's oldest friends," and he glanced at Hotblack, who still hadn't moved so much as an eyelash. "And," said Ford again, wondering what a good word would be to say after "and." The large man came up with a whole sentence to go after "and." He said it. I am Mr. DeSato's bodyguard, and I am responsible for his body, and I am not responsible for yours. So take it away before it gets damaged." "Now, wait a minute," said Ford. "No minutes," boomed the bodyguard. "No waiting. Mr. Stato speaks to no one." "Well, perhaps you'd let him say what he thinks about the matter himself," said Ford. "He speaks to no one," bellowed the bodyguard. Ford glanced anxiously at Hotblack again and was forced to admit to himself that the bodyguard seemed to have the facts on his side. There was still not the slightest sign of movement, let alone keen interest in Ford's welfare. Why? What's the matter with him? The bodyguard told him. But the rest of you will have to wait for tomorrow because the next chapter is like 15 pages.